Evan was 8 when the dream returned for the second time. The first time he had it, he thought it was only a strange trick of sleep, something the mind creates when a child is too tired or too full of thoughts. But the second time, everything was exactly the same as before, and that perfect repetition planted the first seeds of fear inside him. In the dream, he was not lying in his bed. He was above it, floating near the ceiling like a balloon someone forgot to tie down. He couldn't move his arms or legs. He could only tilt his head and look down at the small shape of himself under the blanket. His room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the night light on the dresser. Every detail was painfully clear. He saw the rug with its frayed corners. He saw the books on the shelf near the wall. He saw the toy truck he had dropped earlier and forgotten to pick up. But there were things he didn't recognize. The clock beside his bed ticked in reverse, each number sliding backward as though time itself was trying to undo something. The posters on his wall were covered with unfamiliar scribbles, drawings of stick figures lined up in front of a crooked house shaped like a bent triangle. He never remembered drawing anything like that. The longer he looked, the stranger it all felt. The air in the dream was heavy, almost like breathing through damp cloth. As he drifted, unable to control his motion, he sensed something in the room that did not belong. It wasn't visible, not yet, but felt like the moment before someone speaks your name from behind you. Then came the window. Every time he looked toward it, the curtains seemed to pull themselves apart on their own. His eyes followed them, even when he didn't want to. The glass was always dark, the kind of darkness that eats reflections. And then the shape would appear. A face. Not pressed close, but close enough to see the pale skin and the way the eyes never blinked. The figure watched him sleep. It never moved its mouth. It only stared, then raised a hand and dragged its fingers down the glass slowly. The sound didn't exist in the dream, but Evan felt it inside his teeth. That was when he always woke, gasping, shaking, sweating through the sheets. Claire would sometimes hear him and ask if he had another nightmare. Evan never knew how to explain the floating or the drawings or the man at the window, so he simply told her he dreamed something bad again. She would stroke his hair and tell him he was safe. But he didn't feel safe. Not when he noticed one morning that the toy truck he had dropped in his dream had moved in real life, sitting in the exact spot he had seen from the ceiling. He didn't say a word to his parents then. He didn't even tell his friends at school. He tried to pretend it meant nothing. But the dreams continued every few months, each time identical except one small detail changed. The man at the window got closer. The drawings on the wall multiplied. The urge to look toward the window grew stronger, as if something unseen was guiding his gaze. After the fourth dream, something inside Evan broke. He told Claire everything in a trembling voice. Robert listened too, quiet and strangely tense. When Evan described the man at the window, Robert's hand tightened around the arm of his chair. That night, Robert walked Evan around the outside of the house, checking every window. Nothing was there. No footprints. No marks. But Robert's face looked troubled, like he was holding back a truth. 6 months passed without another dream, and Evan almost believed the nightmare had faded. But then it came again, stronger, colder, and this time, the window in the dream was wide open. When Evan woke, he couldn't move. Sleep paralysis pinned him to the bed. The darkness around him felt wrong, as if something had entered the room without sound. He lay frozen until he finally tore himself free from the paralysis and stumbled to the window. It was locked, but the cold air inside the room felt impossible to explain. He didn't sleep again that night. The worst part wasn't the dream returning. It was what happened after. The conversation with his parents. The way they looked at each other. The way Robert's face changed when Evan described a cut he saw on a man's temple. That was when Evan realized something terrifying. His parents knew who the man was. Mila had always been a heavy sleeper until the first night she moved into the old house on Briar Trail. She was a college student trying to save money, and the small rental room offered by Mrs. Payton seemed perfect at first glance. The house was old but tidy, with creaking floors and wallpaper that peeled at the corners like pages of an unread book. Darren, her older brother, helped her move in and teased her about choosing a place that looked like it belonged in a ghost documentary. That first night, Mila dreamed of the staircase. In the dream, she was standing at the bottom step, staring into a gap beneath it that should have been too small for anyone to fit. Yet, something was there. A woman, curled up. Her skin was pale like old paper, and her hair hung in uneven strands across her face. The woman lifted her head with effort, as if each movement pulled her from a thick swamp of exhaustion. Her eyes met Mila's, and she whispered something that brushed across the dream like cold breath. She whispered Mila's name. Mila woke sweating, heart thudding like she had run miles. She tried to shake off the dream, telling herself it was only the stress of moving. But when she walked down the hall toward the kitchen for water, she noticed how the air near the staircase felt cooler than the rest of the house. She reached toward the railing, and the wood felt damp under her fingertips. Darren called that morning to make sure she was settling in. Mila mentioned the dream only lightly, trying to make it sound like a silly story. He laughed and told her she was just nervous about living alone, then reminded her that he lived only 10 minutes away. His reassurance helped, but the image of the woman beneath the staircase clung to the edges of her thoughts. The dream came back on the third night. This time the woman wasn't whispering her name. Instead, she tapped lightly on the wooden underside of the step above her head. Top, 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 like someone asking politely to be let out. Mila tried to turn away in the dream, but her body refused to move. She leaned closer unwillingly and saw faint scratches on the beams behind the woman, as though she had been scraping at them for years. She woke with the tapping still echoing inside her ears. That day, Mila mentioned the strange dreams to Mrs. Peyton while they drank tea in the sunny kitchen. The landlord's hands trembled slightly as she stirred her drink, but she smiled too quickly and insisted the house had no secrets. The way she avoided looking at the staircase made Mila uneasy. She noticed Mrs. Peyton didn't go near it during the entire conversation. That night was worse. The tapping began not in her dream, but in reality. She lay in bed, listening to the hush of the house, settling when a soft rhythm drifted from the hallway. Top, top, top. Too faint to be footsteps, too precise to be pipes or settling beams. Mila sat up and held her breath. The sound continued irregularly, sometimes pausing, sometimes quickening like someone shifting their weight. She forced herself to open her door. The hallway was dim, lit by the thin light from a street lamp outside. The staircase sat silent, but as she stepped closer, the air grew colder again. She kneeled and pressed an ear to the wooden riser. Silence, then a slow scrape from the other side. Her breath caught. She stumbled back and closed herself in her room, locking the door even though she knew a lock would not stop a dream from following her. The next day, she called Darren, her voice trembling. He came over with a flashlight, determined to check beneath the staircase. But the space was sealed by old boards nailed across the entry. Mila hadn't noticed before, but the wood looked newer than the rest of the house, as if it had been repaired recently, as if something inside had needed to be closed off. Darren tapped the boards lightly and shrugged, telling her it was probably just rodents. But Mila saw the look in his eyes. He didn't believe his own explanation. That night, Mila dreamed again. The woman beneath the staircase had opened her eyes fully. They were not empty or clouded. They were sharp and aware. She held something in her hand. Something small. Something familiar. Mila leaned closer, unwilling but unable to resist. It was a bracelet. Her bracelet. The one she wore as a child. The one she lost years ago. Mila woke with a gasp, so sharp she felt her lungs shake. She reached for her phone to call Darren, but before she could dial, she heard something downstairs. Top, 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 coming from beneath the staircase. And this time, the tapping was accompanied by a whisper that drifted through the quiet house. It whispered her name. Callum had never been the type to remember his dreams. He lived a quiet life, working evening shifts at a manufacturing plant where the lights hummed overhead and the hallways always smelled faintly of metal and old cleaning chemicals. He preferred simple routines. Wake up late morning, eat, work, come home, sleep. Nothing strange, nothing unexpected, until the night the phone began ringing in his dream. He stood in a long corridor, dimly lit by flickering bulbs that buzzed like trapped insects. The hallway looked familiar in a way he couldn't place, like the memory of a place he once passed through as a child. At the far end sat a single table, and on it was a rotary phone the color of dried bone. It rang steadily, not urgently, not loudly, just a slow, steady rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat. When he woke, his room was silent. He brushed it off, telling himself stress had followed him into sleep. But the dream returned the next night, and the next exactly the same. The same hallway, the same table, the same phone. By the fifth night, he found himself growing curious. In the dream, he stepped closer to the phone, feeling the cold tile beneath his bare feet. Each ring vibrated inside his chest like it was happening in his body, not the hallway. He reached toward the receiver, but woke before touching it. A cold sweat coated his hands. Ina, a co-worker who often shared breaks with him, noticed the dark circles under his eyes. She teased him gently at first, then grew concerned when he told her he kept dreaming of a phone ringing in an empty hallway. She encouraged him to talk to someone, maybe a doctor or a counselor. Callum shrugged it off. It wasn't hurting him, just keeping him tired. The next night, he finally answered the phone. In the dream, he stood before the table, his hand hovering above the receiver as the ringing pulsed through him. He didn't want to answer it. Every instinct begged him not to, but something stronger pulled his hand downward. He lifted the receiver to his ear. He heard breathing, steady, slow, close. Then he heard his own name being spoken by a voice he didn't recognize. It sounded old, strained, like someone speaking through water. He wanted to drop the receiver, but his fingers refused to let go. The voice whispered something else, too muffled to understand. Then the line crackled and the dream dissolved. When he woke, his phone on the nightstand lit up as if someone had just called him. But there was no missed call, no notification, only a blank screen. After that, the ringing followed him into the real world. The first time happened at work. Callum was alone on the late shift, checking inventory in one of the older storage wings. The lights above him buzzed softly. He wrote numbers on his clipboard and listened to his own footsteps echo across the concrete. Then he heard it ring, not the plant's phones, not his cell, something else, something too familiar. He turned, expecting to see a phone somewhere behind him, but the hallway was empty. The sound came again. Ring, closer this time. He backed away, gripping the clipboard like a shield. The ringing grew louder, echoing off the metal walls though no phones existed in that wing. Chills crawled across his arms. He fled to the main area where other workers moved about, but the ringing stopped the moment he stepped into the light. The next day, he sought out old Harper, the retired night guard who occasionally visited the plant. Harper knew every part of the building's history. Callum sat with him in the break room and described the dreams and the ringing. The old man listened quietly, his eyes sinking deeper into shadow with every word. When Callum mentioned answering the phone in his dream, Harper's expression darkened. Harper told him about an accident from years ago. The plant once had a basement level that was later sealed off. A worker had been trapped there after a structural collapse, unable to reach anyone. For hours, he tried calling the main floor through the emergency line, but the signal barely worked. His last call was recorded as static, with faint breathing and incomprehensible murmurs. By the time help reached him, he was gone. Callum felt the blood drain from his face. He asked what the worker's name was. Harper shook his head, saying the file had long since been lost, but he remembered one detail. The rescue team said the man had been found near a table with a rotary phone that looked decades old, though no such phone had been installed in the basement. That night, Callum dreamed again, but the hallway was darker, longer, colder. The phone rang endlessly. He tried to walk away, but the floor beneath him stretched like thick tar, refusing to let him escape. He felt the weight of unseen eyes watching him from the darkness beyond the table. When he woke, the ringing continued. This time, it came from inside his closet. He approached it slowly, breath shallow. The door creaked open by itself. The space was empty except for a small table, sitting where no table had ever been. On it, a rotary phone the color of dried bone. It began to ring again. When he lifted the receiver, the voice on the other end whispered a single phrase that chilled him deeper than any nightmare. It said, I finally reached you. And the line did not go silent.